Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. I'm going to be talking about how I got started into kink, how I got started in BDSM, and sort of what my first experiences were like. Normally I would be filming back over there, but people are actually moving out of my apartment complex right now, so there's like 5 people coming and going, and they're actually walking in front of this window too, but at least I'm not like staring directly at them this way, so that is how it's going to be. Hopefully I'll be able to move back over there for other videos, but for now we're just going to have to deal with this situation. So I've talked previously a lot about what my first time in a dungeon was like, what to expect your first time in a dungeon, but I hadn't really gone back and fully explained like how I got started into kink, how I realized it was into pet play, how I realized that I have what kinks that I do, and I thought it would be a good way to sort of show other people what my life is like, and then also how different people get involved in kink. When it comes specifically to pet play, I first realized I was a pet in a BDSM sense when I was probably about 19, but I had always had very pet-like ways of behaving for a very long time. Even back when I was like 4 or 5 years old, my favorite game was always make believe and pretend. I loved playing different kinds of animals. Dogs and wolves specifically were always my favorite, but when I was really big into like lions and the Lion King, I did lions a lot as well. Just basically any kind of animal I could be, and had a very like animalistic way of interacting with other people. Like I didn't do this when I was in school, but specifically with my sister because I have a twin sister. Um, we had a lot of like roughhousing type of play, and like I growled and barked and stuff. My sister used to make fun of me for that, like so badly. And to be fair, I was a pretty fucked up, weird little kid, so it makes sense. But it really hurt my feelings, and I mean, I'm weird, so I can't really help it. But I did get made fun of for that. Luckily, I never did anything like that in school, so I didn't like get bullying that way. But with my twin sister, I definitely did, and that pretty much continued in various ways all throughout my life. Like in middle school, I did a lot of like role playing type of things. Like I don't know if this is still around, but from when I was in 7th or 8th grade, probably until the end of high school, I did like online like chat role play, like not necessarily like a live chat like AIM or anything like that, but there would be specific websites. There was like a forum where you would like create a character, and there would be like plot lines and different like groups you could join, and then you would like type and like role play out like different characters. And I did that shit with like wolves for forever. That was like my favorite thing in the whole world to do. And I'm actually a really great writer, and I actually like learned how to like type and like type quickly doing stuff like that. So definitely not a bad thing, and I'm still very much in love with writing, although I don't do that anymore because a lot of the rooms have sort of gone away, or it's mostly like younger people, and so I don't necessarily associate with that anymore. But it was definitely very formative in how I interacted with animals and understood sort of from an animal point of view. Also, when I was in middle school, I read basically every book about like anthropomorphic animals, and I don't necessarily mean like anthropomorphic in a furry sense, but series like Warriors. That was like my favorite book series for the longest time. I read the shit out of those books, which is basically cats, dogs, any kind of animal, really. I think I also read Desero, which got turned into a movie, which is weird to me because Desero was a fucking dark ass book. But it turned into a movie for like little kids. But I really like Desero, and I really like The Warriors. Basically, any kind of book that was about animals, like whether that be house cats, wild cats, mice, whatever. Acting and speaking in a way that humans do. Like I don't like it was about like animals having their own society and their own ways of interacting, but then kind of being able to understand like hear what they're saying. I don't really know how to explain what those book series are like well, but I really like those kinds of books. And then when I was in high school, I got away from that a bit more because I was a weirdo. Like I have been a goth since then. I was really into anime and manga, although I didn't actually read any like Cat Girl or Inumimi or Kononomimi like type series. Although I probably would have if I could have found them, but I didn't really focus on that. More or less, what I did is that was when I sort of started to do kind of kinky things but not really realizing that they were kinky. Like, I did not experiment with porn, I didn't masturbate, no, didn't do anything sexually, I didn't have any sort of reference that I'd used that had inspired me to do these things. I kind of just fucking did them, which makes it even weirder because I just did it spontaneously. So for example, I had a boyfriend, like my first serious long-term boyfriend. I think we dated for about a year, and we both wore dog collars. Like, we both gave each other dog collars to wear. We did lots of like physical things that were animalistic, shall we say. That kind of thing happened when I was in high school. I specifically remember sort of my first actual inclination of what BDSM was probably, I think it was junior in high school. I was either 16 or 17 at the time, which was too young to do actual BDSM things, so I didn't because I was smart slash scared. More scared than I was aware that it was against the law, but, you know, regardless, I didn't end up doing anything, but I had a lot of more, like, it was sexting, but it wasn't necessarily sexual. It was about just, like, BDSM things. There was one person in particular that I always texted that I really, really wanted to do stuff with, but I never ended up doing it. And I'm kind of glad that I did because it probably would have turned out badly. Yeah, that was sort of when I realized what BDSM was. When I was in college, starting when I was a freshman, I realized that I didn't really know a whole lot about sex. Because I grew up in a Catholic household, because I had lived in a state where sex education was more or less, here are all the dangerous STIs you could get, and also the only way to make sure you don't get pregnant or get any of these terrible, horrible, horrific things is to never have sex. So, like, I basically, what I would do is when I took health classes, I would just be like, this is disgusting. I literally cannot physically see this because I did the whole scare-tastic with diseases thing. I would just, like, sit with a book and just stare at the book and read the book for as long as I physically could and did not pay attention. I, of course, like, understood what various things were and kind of generally how they operated, but, like, I didn't know what a clitoris was. I didn't have any sort of experience, other people in my life I could talk to, so I fucking went ham, and I watched, like, every Lacey Green video, and I did, like, so much research just learning about sex and, like, human sexuality and how to do sex well and how the human body works and, like, all of that stuff. So when I was a freshman and a sophomore in college, my focus wasn't even on BDSM. I was just really passionate about, like safe, good sex and, like, good, safe sex practices. Like, that was what my background was. I think that has served me really well going into BDSM. And it also helped me a lot when I was in college, specifically because there was a lot of that pressure around, like, casual, no strings attached sex and, like, multiple partner sex and all that, and I, like, knew how to handle it because I had taken my research so seriously. Probably when I was going between my sophomore and my junior year, that is when I started more seriously talking about BDSM because, again, I had had those kinds of, like, weird experiences when I was in high school, but I hadn't really done anything with that freshman or sophomore year. So I had, like, conversations with friends kind of theoretically about BDSM. Like, I have one friend who is still very much my friend to this day. We've known each other since we were sophomores in high school. And we've lived separately. We lived in completely opposite ends of the United States for, like, 4 years. We haven't seen each other since then, but we still have lots of, like, very deep philosophical discussions. And he's vanilla, but he's really into, like, kinky porn. Like, he watches kinky porn, like BDSM porn, and is still very vanilla in his real life, doesn't want to, like, act on it or anything. And so we were kind of, like, talking about that and talking about representation of BDSM and sort of what BDSM means and how, like, power dynamic works. Like, I was very fascinated by the power exchange element of BDSM. And again, this was without doing any research, and I sort of spontaneously thought of it. So I'm like, you know, if you think about it, like, BDSM is kind of like a circuit almost. Like, the submissive is still really the one with the power, even though they're giving up all the power in the context of a scene. Like, where the fuck did I come up with that just spontaneously off the top of my head? Like, I have no idea how I came up with that. I have no idea, but apparently my head was in the right place. At the time, though, I was in a long-term relationship with somebody who I realize now is not a healthy relationship, and I don't really want to go into the details about it, but it was not good for me. I ended up breaking up. He broke up with me. He did not handle that well at all. He went completely crazy. Like, I mean, like, he was diagnosed with, what was it? It's something, it was uh, it was a specific kind of disorder that involved delusions of grandeur, and like having, that be a huge factor. So some kind of thing involving delusions of grandeur, and he constantly lied to me, and it was just not good. It was not good. And that was basically when I started getting into kink, because one of the things that precipitated the end of that relationship was I really wanted to explore power exchange. I really wanted to explore BDSM and get to know it more, because as I was talking more about it and reading more about it, I found elements of it that I thought actually sounded really enjoyable and interesting and fun. This was also when I sort of discovered pet play online, like as an actual thing, and I was like, oh shit, that sounds like me. I think one of my friends actually referenced me to the BDSM.org test, which is basically a test that gives you percentages of what kind of different archetypes of BDSM you might fall into. So there might be an H player, a mommy, a dom, a primal hunter, primal play. My three biggest ones that I came up with were primal hunter, primal prey, and pet. So clearly I have a theme going on here. And I was like, what does that mean? So I started to research it, and there was not a lot on the internet at this time about primal. Like, I kept finding stuff about vor, which is not what primal is at all. You can kind of see how it's related, but that is its own separate kink. It's not even necessarily a part of BDSM. Like, it's its own thing. It's not related. So didn't end up finding a whole lot about primal until I actually started to get involved in BDSM more. But basically, when I broke up with that boyfriend, or rather, he broke up with me, uh, that is when I made a FetLife account. I think I literally had 2 days afterwards, like, of being sad and then being angry, and I was like, fuck this. I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna make a FetLife account. I'm gonna find people. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be fun. I think at this time I was 19, going on 20. Uh, so when I was 19, I made a FetLife account in the small college town where I lived. I found somebody who was also a student at the same university I went to, and he helped kind of tutor me and show me the ropes. He was very much a hedonistic type of dom, and he wasn't necessarily overly sexual. Like, he very much just liked teaching people. So there are totally people out there that you can find who don't want to have any sort of committed romantic relationship with you, but are totally willing to teach you. Like, we were really good friends. At the same time, I also got involved with my last partner, who is my long-term dom, for about a year and a half. And I was both playing with them. Like, it was my intention when I was doing this to have two casual play partners, have one as my mentor slash teacher, and have one as like a play partner. And I was also kind of playing around with like two other people very sporadically at the same time. So I had like 4 different people I was all like learning from, and kind of learning about different kinds of BDSM and learning about different kinds of power exchange with. And then 2 of them were like, so I really like you, and I don't want you to see other people, and you have to choose. And I was like, okay. Because at this time, I was not yet experienced enough in the world and had not read enough to realize that polyamory was totally a thing, and it was a really big thing in BDSM, especially where I live. So I had to choose, and I ended up choosing my last partner, Avery, who I was with again for a year and a half. And he was very much a sadist, and I'm very much not a masochist. So, to a lot of ways that didn't really work out, but he was very enthusiastic about pet play, and I don't really want to talk about that relationship too much because it's behind me, but it was definitely very much a learning and growing experience. I would say my one regret that I have about the way that I got started in BDSM was the play partners that I set out and the play partners I found. They were close to me in age, but because of that, they were also relatively inexperienced. Like, they were all probably within 5 years of how old I was, so 20 to 25. So that made it a little bit difficult to learn from somebody who had had a wealth of experience. I think especially when it comes to being a dom, it takes probably at least until you're 30, assuming that you've been involved in BDSM since you were 18 or 19, to really have a good grasp on things and really be able to read a submissive. That's not to say it's not worth playing with people under the age of 30, but I think specifically if you were a brand fucking new submissive, you need somebody who has enough experience like that. Like, can be a little bit messy, especially if you're not one for a large age gap and that's something that you're not really looking for. But if you can find like a 31, 32-year-old Dom who is strictly a platonic friend to you and helps you learn about submission, helps you learn about BDSM, can be your guide in your local community, totally worth it. Right when I made a FetLove account, I found the local dungeon. I actually ended up going to a pet play themed play party, which was my first party ever, and I had such a great time. There were two people I had met through FetLife that were going to that same party, and I went with them, and it was just so much fun, and I'm so glad that I went because it really allowed me to be able to explore more in BDSM and go to sloshes, go to munches, go to future parties because I had a comfortable level with so many things. And I think one of the most eye-opening things about that first dungeon experience, and I'm not sure if I talked about this, was just the sheer variety of people that went to this event. Like, there was a guy I saw there who was probably in his late 70s who was wearing a full male chastity device. There was a probably 35-year-old age player named Joey who was a switch. He was very much a sadist, very much a masochist. I saw him get a cell popping done my first time at a BDSM dungeon. We also did like play wrestling together. Like, he was very much definitely stereotypical little in some ways, like onesies and coloring, but then also extremely dark and interesting at the same time. And it was so great to be able to see that. I saw cross dressers, I saw people of all ages and all sizes, and it is so great that I got to see that. And I really hope that you, my viewers, the people watching this video in general, you get to experience stuff like that too, because so much of the time you only see, the pretty pictures on Instagram, the pretty pictures on Tumblr. The people who go K and P on FetLife are always the same. You don't really get to see that kind of like rawness and variety a lot of times when you're just on the internet. That is basically everything that ended up happening, and that was really how I got started in kink. I went to that dungeon till I had graduated college and I moved somewhere else. I had another great experiences. I got into doing photo shoots and like learning more about bondage and rope bondage and doing stuff like that. It was so much fun. But yeah, that is basically how I got started in kink and what my journey was like. So if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to share your personal story, feel free to put that down below in the comments. If you want to find my social media, you can find that down in the description box below, as well as any sort of related videos. You can also find my Patreon if you guys want to support this channel and see more. I would really, really, really appreciate it. So hopefully I will see you guys all again soon. And until I see you next time, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.